Support for First Coast Connect is provided in part by Baptist Health and North Florida TPO.
Good morning, I'm Ann Schindler, and this is First Coast Connect. Today, a new ice age. With crackdowns ramping up in frequency, intensity, and lethality, we get perspective on how it's impacting the lives of immigrants and the rights of everyone. Later in the program, what a Grammy Award-winning wind quintet is bringing to the Jacksonville Symphony Youth Orchestra and classical music fans across the First Coast. But first, a frigid weekend of ice and cold in Minneapolis amid one of the most intense and controversial immigration crackdowns in the nation. Here to talk about its impact and implications, we're joined by Jacksonville criminal defense and civil rights attorney Matt Kachergus. Matt, good morning.
Good morning.
We're also joined by Maria Garcia, Jacksonville Immigration Alliance advocate and volunteer. Maria, good morning.
Good morning.
And the very Reverend Kate Moorehead Carroll, Dean of St. John's Cathedral. Good morning.
Good morning.
So I'm going to start with you, Dean Carroll, although I do want to invite our listeners to call. We do want to hear from you. If you have a family member who has had an experience with ICE, or if you have thoughts about the uptick in enforcement around the nation or locally, you can join our conversation at 904-549-2937, or you can go to firstcoastconnect.org to find all the ways that you can connect with us. Dean Carroll, I want to start with you because you were in Minneapolis recently when Renee Nicole Good was fatally shot by ICE agents. You just sort of happened to be there, but can you tell us a little bit about how you received that news and what happened in the hours and days afterwards?
I was in Minneapolis to travel with my husband and was only there for one day, and it happened to be the day that Renee Good was shot. Of course, we were all stunned by the news, and I felt like I was there for a reason. So I walked to the place where she was shot, and it's hard to describe it. I've been to Israel and Gaza in the late 90s, and when you walk between Israel and Gaza around the Bethlehem area, there's a no man's land you have to pass through with roadblocks, and there's this eerie silence there, and it was very similar feeling. It was hard to believe I was in the United States of America. I walked to the site where her car hit the pole, and there's a lot of flowers there. You've probably seen pictures. Paparazzi from all over the world, but just a general silence like the aftermath of an explosion. This was a traumatic and chaotic and terrible thing that happened. But the fact that this is happening in our own country, I think, is what shocked me the most.
Matt, I want to ask you about the Minneapolis incident, because one of the things that we do know in the aftermath is that the Deputy Attorney General of the United States, Todd Blanche, has said there is no investigation of what happened here, that they are not investigating. He said if there comes a time when we need to, we will, but not now. Is it unusual that an incident like this, where a citizen is killed by an ICE agent, would not be investigated?
Normally, yes, that would be unusual. But under this administration, I think, as we've seen, not only from the first term, but just 1 year in at this point, it doesn't seem unusual at all. This is right out of the playbook. And I would contend there is an investigation from what I've heard. You had 6 members of the U.S. Attorney's Office just resigned because apparently the investigation that the Department of Justice wants to do is into Miss Good's spouse, nothing relating to her killing. So I think that's just where we are in 2026.
I mean, it is worth saying who they are investigating, because as you said, in addition to her spouse, they are investigating Governor Tim Walz. They are investigating Minneapolis Mayor Jacob Frey. They are investigating protesters who demonstrated at a church over the weekend because one of the pastors apparently was an ICE employee. And they are investigating employees of a hospital there who had raised concerns, Maria, about the fact that ICE agents were going into the emergency room there, shackling patients to the bed, treating patients as they were undergoing emergency treatment as criminal detainees. The employees of that facility held a press conference and they said, we need some direction from our administrators. We need some rules here, some guidance about how to act when people are coming in without a warrant. They're masked. We don't know who they are. They're not identifying themselves, and they're interfering with patient care. And in response, the Department of Homeland Security subpoenaed all of their personnel records, every employee of the facility there, the emergency facility.
It really makes you think about the place where our country is. Feels like we've turned a page, and it feels like we've reached a line here, and there's not a lot coming back for it. There's before, and then there's after. It actually reminds me personally of my heritage is Puerto Rican, and there was a long and documented history of any Puerto Ricans that advocated for any type of independence to be surveyed and surveilled and files kept on them. So this is the kind of reprisal that reminds me of like using that type of surveillance and that type of intimidation to keep people from speaking out. But I'm really glad that those Hennepin County nurses are standing strong and holding the line to defend their patients, because that is what they took an oath to do. So
there has been a pretty incredible turnout, Kate, in terms of the representation in very, very cold weather. So we kind of alluded to the fact that it's pretty frigid. It's been averaging 5 degrees there about the last 3 or 4 days in Minneapolis. And yet there have been these really substantial demonstrations around the city, people turning out. You can only imagine what it would be like if it wasn't quite so cold. But there is a real intensive presence there in the city with 3,000 some ICE agents, another 1,500 Army paratroopers on standby who could be called in. And that's in a city where the police force is about 500 people.
Amazing. Yeah. When you're walking the streets, you just see these men with guns walking around, and it really is occupied territory right now. And the hardest part of it for me really is that if someone lives here and has been working here for a long time, there's no way for someone who is in the service industry to be legal. There's no legal avenue for them to apply now. Since 1977, that's been the case. We've allowed people into this country and allowed them to work and pay taxes, but there hasn't really been a legal way for them to become citizens, permanent residents that are approved by the government. And so you're calling someone a criminal, but you haven't given them the capacity to become legal. And therein lies this great injustice.
Yeah. We've got a call from Kendra in Mandarin. Good morning, Kendra. Go ahead.
Good morning. Well, I've traveled extensively my entire life, and in the past 2 years, I've been on 6 continents. Although I've never entered a country without the proper documentation, if I were to, I would expect to be treated properly and likely thrown out of the country, but in a civil way. What I would never expect is to be beaten up, kidnapped, or disappeared. And I certainly would not expect that in the USA. Seeing these masked men who have no identification on them grab people, I've never seen that. And I've traveled to Africa, Southeast Asia, all throughout Central America and Europe. I've never seen anything like that. And so I think it's beyond inappropriate and really needs to change. Thank you.
Kendra, thank you. Matt, I want to ask you about that, and the masking in particular, because there have been a number of incidents in Minneapolis that have been documented about people who are at a gym or at a hardware store, outside schools, high school, that had incidents where people who worked at the school were tackled. There was pepper spray that was set off. This was as students were being released. And in most cases, these are people with weapons, sometimes being displayed, and they're masked. And, people have observed that there's not any real way to know if the person that's picking you up off the street and putting you in a car is an ICE agent who's authorized to do that in some capacity, or a street criminal who's taking advantage of a situation of vulnerability. What expectation is there traditionally that someone who's making an arrest like that identify themselves, or show their face?
Traditionally, what we expect is that you know who you're dealing with. The officers have their name on their uniforms, which is what we're used to encountering. They have badge numbers, and in the past, they used to be forthcoming with what that number is so that they would identify themselves, their law enforcement, and then you can act accordingly. With, I'm sure the government would take the position, oh, they're doing this for their own protection, they're being doxxed and what have you, but this is all part of, as you've alluded to, the intimidation campaign, not only with the nurses, but just Friday, a federal judge in Minneapolis issued an injunction, not on behalf of the immigrants, but U.S. citizens that are observing, monitoring, recording, that there's multiple instances in the court's order of indiscriminately gassing people that are observing, grabbing them, arresting them, or just detaining them and removing them for several hours to the federal building before being released. This isn't just immigrants that are being caught in this, but U.S. citizens that are engaging in protected First Amendment activity are also being swept up. I heard some reporting late last week that some of these observers that would be following in cars, these agents would loop around and go to the people in the cars' homes to let them know, we know where you are. If these observers would continue to follow them after that, they would loop back around, go up to the door, knock, and let their family know that we know who you are. And we can't, we're talking about it in the immigration context, but this can't be lost on what's happening globally with this administration. Just last week, we're reading about a New York or a Washington Post reporter that had a search warrant executed at her home. And that's unprecedented. But it's to chill people's First Amendment rights, and that's what they're doing in Minneapolis, and that's what they're doing nationwide with these crackdowns, is to silence any dissent, constitutionally protected or not. And it's a troubling aspect of what we're seeing now that we haven't seen traditionally.
That issue of citizens who are participating in protest in some way being surveilled is something that I personally was seeing a lot on my own social media. I used to live in Minneapolis, and the wife of a guy who was in a band I would see all the time, he was in the Honey Dogs and Golden Smog. She was participating in one of these protests of sorts, following agents who were conducting raids, just to basically track what they're doing and to be a public observer of what they're doing. And to Matt's point, she was later interviewed because her car was surrounded. She was photographed by an ICE agent. Her license plate was photographed by an ICE agent. He started calling her by her name, Judith, and then got back in his car and led her to her own house, which she viewed as an attempt to intimidate her and to stop her from participating. That's not something that is something we've seen much of before.
Again, that's something that I grew up being told. Maria, if you're an activist, they're going to put files on you. They're going to have a file on you because I'm Puerto Rican, and that's what they would do. Any independence activist, they'd have a big, long file. Left the house at 8:30 a.m., had lunch here, came back here. So those of us that have been in the game kind of know that that's what the government does. And now with this escalation, the threat of surveillance and reprisal is stronger. But I think those of us in the organizing space we accept that as a risk and as a consequence.
I mean, I was going to ask, what impact is that having more broadly on people who are encouraging people to get involved, citizens who want to support immigrants in this period, and just the tenor of the people who are inclined to speak out or protest in some way? What impact is it having, those tactics?
Oh, there are folks messaging the Jacksonville Immigrant Rights Alliance page daily, like almost every hour on the hour. How can I get involved? When's the next protest? I want to do rapid response. So it seems like it's not deterring people at all. But what my message is let's do this in an organized fashion. I don't recommend that anybody just go out by themselves and do ICE Watch. Like, join an organization like the Jacksonville Immigrant Rights Alliance, so that we can pool our resources and make sure that if we are observing anything like that, that someone knows that you're out there, that someone can, have their eyes on you, that's on your side, you know.
What are some of the risks people run if they are trying to do this kind of on their own, or maybe without a proper awareness of some of the rules and guidelines around what they can and can't do?
Yeah, so here in Jacksonville, and in Florida, one of the particular risks is that immigration enforcement is closely tied with the police departments because of the 287G agreements, which are agreements that police departments have signed with the federal government to deputize their officers as immigration agents. And then there's also the HALO law that went into effect January of last year that states that you cannot get within 25 feet of a first responder that is in the line of their duty, I guess. So 25 feet is a lot longer than you would imagine. It's like three like Honda Civics back to back. And so if you get within that space, you are liable to be arrested. And that causes an issue because we're supposed to be observing and advocating for people that are being detained. And so it's really difficult to do that if then folks are having to pull attention away from that and say like, oh, free this person because they got arrested for observing.
We have a question for you that just popped on Facebook from Hope saying, can Maria explain the agreement between our sheriff's office and ICE, which makes them complicit in the unfounded arrests happening in our own community?
Right. So, 287G agreements across the board is basically just the police department saying that, we will assist with immigration enforcement. So, let's say JSO initiates a traffic stop, they can then use that as pretext to ask people their like immigration status, and then take people to jail, and then they have agreements, and they're trying even more to start processing people. There's a ICE detainment or processing center on the south side that they take people to, and then more than likely they take them to like that Baker Correctional Institution all the way out in Sanderson, Florida. There's also agreements here with the city, like there last year there was a piece of the budget approved so that JSO could get fingerprinting technology, so that they could run people's fingerprints against, I guess, immigration databases. So
kind of on the roadside.
Right.
Yeah. We should say we did reach out to the Department of Homeland Security and to the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office ahead of this segment for comment. We did get a comment from the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office, which said JSO continually partners with a variety of federal agencies to include ICE as it relates to immigration violations and enforcement. In that vein, we have been an active participant in the 287G program for more than 15 years. We will continue in this endeavor to enforce all applicable laws and partner with local, state, and federal agencies in an effort to make our community a safer place for families to thrive. We have a couple calls I want to get to. Jennifer in Mandarin. Good morning, Jennifer. Go ahead. Jennifer, can you hear us? You're on air.
Oh, hello. Yes. Can you hear me?
Yep. Go ahead.
So I just want to clarify. I don't understand how you are speaking about all this so calmly, as if this is very routine and oh, it's really abnormal. No, this is fire alarm. This is ethnic cleansing. This is racial profiling. This is not about immigration. This is about cleansing and white nationalism. You have ICE agents that are really the president's police. They have complete immunity from the justice system. The Department of Justice is now weaponized by the president. We actually have no representative government anymore because they're gerrymandering our votes. And if the Congress has abdicated power to control the abuse of power by the executive, by the president, by the justice system, then we have no representation any longer. So they can do whatever they want. They dress like they're going to Fallujah instead of doing immigration in the military weapons, I can't tell if I'm looking at Minnesota or I'm looking at Iran. And if we're not careful, United States is going to look like Iran in a few years, because all of this will become normalized, quote unquote, and then you will have absolutely no rights when they're intimidating doctors and nurses and they're arresting people in the hospital after they've been injured. This is what they do in Iran. They go in there and now they not only arrest protesters in hospitals in Iran, they shoot them, just like they shot Renee Good in the face 3 times and then called her an effing B. And there's no investigation. The guy's been hidden. The guy's been protected. And there's no investigation except against protesters who are now going to be called domestic terrorists, and they're going to be investigated arresting protesters. So America's losing freedom. And if we don't impeach this president, we don't change this right now, we are going to turn into Iran or North Korea.
Jennifer, thanks so much for your call. We have a call from Daryl in St. Augustine. Good morning, Daryl. Go ahead.
Hey, good morning, Ann, and thank you. And the last caller's right. This is not about immigration. This is about intimidation. The proof of that is that the only place ICE is in those locations and those places and those states that have not already submitted themselves to Donald Trump and the MAGA Republican Party. The Republican Party is submissive to what he's doing, and the Democratic Party and Democratic states and Donna Deegan and Jacksonville, it's about intimidating those people and arresting those people that do not agree with the bully in chief. The proof of that is go to Hastings and look at the cabbage fields. There's all kinds of migrant workers. Go to any of the massive real estate developments and subdivisions that are being built there. There's all kinds of migrant laborers out there. But somehow they're going to downtown Jacksonville and going to downtown Minneapolis. This has nothing to do with immigration.
Thanks, Daryl. I appreciate your comments. To his point, there has been, the mayor has also been sort of caught up in this. Last week, one of her employees was suspended for a period that has yet to be determined for making some comments on social media. Yaya Cardona, who people will be familiar with, she used to appear on this program, but is the mayor's Hispanic outreach coordinator, and she basically offered some advice to people who might be facing ICE agents and also preparing for it in terms of getting their affairs in order. She urged people to comply, but there was a considerable pushback on that, particularly from Republican state leaders. I want to first take a listen to what Mayor Deegan had to say when asked about this last week.
What happened with Miss Yanira Cardona had absolutely nothing to do with the content of what came out of her mouth, okay? I don't have any problem. We checked with the general counsel's office. Nothing that she shared said anything about anyone who was here illegally. It was simply giving the community information that was freely available, and also giving information about their legal rights. Get representation. Make sure you have a plan. She said a dozen times, if you are stopped, comply. So it wasn't the content of what she said that I took issue with.
So that's Mayor Deegan. Of course, others, as we said, had a very different view. The Attorney General, James Uthmeyer, called her comments illegal. Our Jacksonville State Representative, Kyan Michael, called it lawless. And Governor DeSantis himself spoke about it. Let's take a look and a listen to what he had to say.
These guys that are out there, they've been treated very horribly across the country, and they really have a target on their back. And I know you had that one woman in the city of Jacksonville government putting out information. Look, that's not the way we roll here in the state of Florida. We're going to respect that, respect the law enforcement, respect the rule of law.
I want to take a call now from John in St. Augustine. Good morning, John. Go ahead.
Hi, I just want to express my appreciation to the Jacksonville Sheriff's Department and any other Sheriff's Department that is assisting ICE or just simply enforcing normal laws such as traffic laws that would prevent the state of Florida from ending up like a state of Minnesota. A lot of the problems they're having out there are simply because the local law enforcement isn't enforcing local law enforcement type laws like traffic laws, like blocking traffic and noise ordinances and that sort of thing. And it's making it so that ICE has to step in and perform their own policing to protect their own people from people who are breaking what are just simply normal laws that impede their investigations. And so in Florida, with the local law enforcement actually doing their job, it allows ICE to do their job and keeps everybody safe and keeps us from ending up in a civil unrest type situation like we see in Minnesota.
Good. And John, when you say the problems they're having in Minnesota, are you talking about the fraud issue, or what else are you referencing?
No, what I'm talking about is take the Ms. Good situation. If the local law enforcement in Minnesota actually have stand-down orders, so they are literally enforcing, let's just call it like city code type laws, like traffic laws, like blocking traffic, noise ordinance type laws. And so what that does is it makes it so that ICE is unsafe in performing their duties. And so the reason why you see so many ICE officers is because they're not only having to bring in staff to perform the ICE operations, they're having to bring in staff to perform the protection of those ICE officers because the local police simply is just not policing, if you will.
All right. Thanks, John. Appreciate that. We've got a call from Ben on the north side. Good morning, Ben. Go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to follow on what John has said is what we're doing, we're treating people that have come here broken the law. Of course, they want a better life, but we have places import like Ellis Island. And believe it or not, if you study Ellis Island, people that came here, they weren't just open arm welcome. They had to go through a screening process. And if they were termed to be a drain on the state, they were sent back. They were put back on the boat. So you have to remember that we have to protect our country.
Ben, thank you. I think we get the gist of your comments. Unfortunately, the connection is really terrible, but I appreciate that. Reverend Carroll, what is it that you're hearing from the community here primarily? I mean, are you hearing concerns from people about ICE enforcement? Are you hearing from people like we heard from Ben or John who are largely supportive of these efforts? What is it that you are seeing in the community?
I'm hearing a little bit of both, but for the most part, what I'm hearing is fear on both sides. Somehow we've gotten into a reactive setting where we are all afraid, and that's what leads to the kind of trauma that happened with Renee Good. Everyone is feeling under attack. Everyone is feeling reactionary, and we've got to somehow de-escalate the temperature. I know, cops are trained to de-escalate when they go into an abusive situation in a home. We're getting into almost a domestic dispute in our country, and we have to de-escalate the violence and the reactivity, and create safe ways for people to protest, because that's part of our human rights that we view in this country. They're so important to us. We have to find a way to argue in safety, and come to some kind of consensus. That's so important. People are afraid.
Do you feel that being in Minneapolis when that killing happened has given you a different perspective on this issue? Do you feel that you have any kind of new obligation to talk about it?
Yes, I do. Because the situation in Minneapolis is likely to continue and reach new cities in time. And this is not what I want to see happening in Jacksonville one day.
Yeah. Matt, I want to ask you about, we've talked a lot about the immigrant community and the fear that they're feeling or the enforcement that they're facing, but this is something that is also impacting U.S. citizens. And we saw in Minneapolis over the weekend a grandfather taken from his home wearing nothing but boxer shorts and Crocs in the middle of this, sub-zero wind chill temperature. A man of Hmong descent, and a U.S. citizen taken from his home. His 5-year-old grandson was there. He was later released. But this is something that is not just happening to people who are not immigrants. And I know that you have some thoughts about the potential for, where this could lead.
Oh, and I think the first caller of the last round, where does this stop? Because right now it's the immigration enforcement. But what we're seeing with the weaponization of the Department of Justice, and I know the other side, well, Biden did it too, and that's, I think, a function of our politics, that everything is so divisive based upon what political leaning you have. But the question I'm starting to see is, where does this stop? Because it's not just the grandfather. There was the young man at Target that's a citizen that's being detained and disappeared. So this,
a 17-year-old.
Yes. And so it's frightening to see this happening to our own citizenry. And it's not just, oh, well, these people are illegal immigrants. No, it isn't. These are U.S. citizens that are facing these enforcement actions that have done nothing wrong in many of these instances. So it's really disturbing. And unfortunately, I think it's a function of where politics in this country is and has been now for 15, 20 years.
I want to take a call from Mike on the South Side. Good morning, Mike. Go ahead.
Hey, good morning. I just wanted to comment as far as the ICE and some of the situations that we're seeing. I just wonder how we are to uphold the immigration laws without them doing what they're doing right now. It's kind of a catch-22. If you don't do anything, then the law is not enforced. And it just doesn't seem to be a really easy answer to it. And I know some people do get caught up in it that might be American citizens. And I'm hearing it here and there. I don't know how widespread it actually is. But that's all I had.
Thank you for your feedback, Mike. Thanks for joining the conversation. There have been some protests. There was one this weekend, Maria. What are you seeing in the community in terms of visibility of protest? Has it grown? Is there more of it? What's happening in the advocacy community?
Yeah, so there have been two recent large-scale protests called by the Jacksonville Immigrant Rights Alliance. The first one was in response to Renee Good, the murder of Renee Good. That got about 300 people out into the streets on extremely short notice. And this past weekend, we had an emergency action, a visibility action, just in response to the local ICE raids that got about, I would say about 200 people out at the peak. We just wanted to go to the spot where the first reportings of ICE enforcement happened in Jacksonville along the Mi Pueblo restaurant on Beach Boulevard, and just be seen and be heard that we want ICE out. And so the kind of the spontaneous reaction from people and just the amount of support that we got in such a short time just shows that there are a lot of people in Jacksonville and across the nation that are not in favor of this, that we live in our communities side by side with our immigrant brothers and sisters, regardless of what their paperwork says. And that works a lot better, just us living side by side, coexisting, than these traffic stops and these raids and people desperately calling around trying to find out where their family member has been taken to, trying to find out who can legally represent them, where they're going to get the money to do that, where they're going to get the money to replace the lost income from a family member. I don't see how this is a solution to what people see as breaking the law, which again, I want to emphasize that, immigration is a civil matter. Like, going into the country unauthorized or undocumented is a civil offense,
Not a criminal one, right? I want to come back to you on the need and opportunities for people to get involved if they're interested. But we do have a lot of calls I want to get to. Linda in Mandarin. Good morning, Linda. Go ahead.
Good morning. I want to say that I think this is very uncomfortable because this is the ugly underbelly of the exceptional America. But many people have been invisible to this horror, and it really put it into focus when we have a majority white community being brutalized by masked Gestapo looking men. I mean, the Japanese internment, the Trail of Tears, recently in Minneapolis, they took away 3 Native Americans and disappeared them. The tribal chief was trying to find out. Think about that. The audacity of people who came to America on a boat, which Trump says they can't do to Greenland, claim a country they came to on a boat. Disappearing Native Americans, this is their land. I just want people to focus on the ugliness that's always been there. We just have to step into it and stay engaged when it does impact us.
Linda, thanks for your call. We also have a call from Tom on the west side. Good morning, Tom. Go ahead.
Good morning to you all, too. Just want to say I have watched with horror as ICE actions have gone from pushing and shoving bystanders and protesters to full-on assault, and ultimately now they are killing people. And that's just heartbreaking, but totally foreseeable because, you've had an agency that just expanded rapidly, reduced training, and then just removed all accountability for their officers. And the end result is tragic, and we're seeing it every day.
Thanks so much. We also have a call from Miss Green in St. Johns County. Good morning. Go ahead.
Oh, yes, good morning. I just want to say that a lot of these immigrants, just to clear the record, they are either going through the process of being vetted. Not all of them are quote unquote illegal immigrants. A lot of them, they are in the process. They have their attorneys. They came here the legal way, and they're having the carpet removed from under their feet. I just want to say in closing that the First Lady of this country is an immigrant. And she was allowed to go through the process. She did not have the rug pulled from under her feet, and we need to allow these other immigrants that same grace.
Thanks so much for that call. Maria, I do want to ask you if people are interested in participating or interested in just kind of knowing more about the effort that you're working on. What is a good way for them to get in touch? Are there needs in the community that could be met?
Yeah, for sure. Right now, a lot of the need is just to have an organized resistance against what's happening in our community. So joining an organization like the Jacksonville Immigrant Rights Alliance is paramount. There are efforts as well to donate food to families who basically are too afraid to leave their homes or who just no longer have the income because one of their family members was taken. And so, I would say if you want to get involved, you can email us at unidosjax@gmail.com. That's UNIDOSJAX@gmail.com. We're on all social media as at jira.jax. It's time. It's as we can see from the callers that we've heard from, the time for just passive observation has long passed. In whatever way that folks can, we should be getting involved, whether that is being at a protest, whether that is helping to gather and distribute supplies for people, whether that is observing and trying to get information of folks that have been basically pulled off the street so that their families can be aware and start the process of locating them. All of that is of utmost necessity at this time.
Well, we have a lot of calls we weren't able to get to. We appreciate everybody calling and writing in with their comments. It's obviously an important issue, good to be educated about regardless of what side you're on. Matt Kachergus, Maria Garcia, and the very Reverend Kate Moorehead Carroll, thank you all so much for being here. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.